Welcome back to another video, guys. It is Base here, and this is part 1 of the series, How to Get Started in X-Plane. And for this episode, we're going to be going over one of the more simpler aircrafts you can find in X-Plane, which is a Cessna 172, and they're most commonly used as trainers or air taxis, just for personal use. So to get started, we're just going to go over some of the basic specifications of the plane so you can get to know the plane you're going to be learning in. So to start off, we have one Lycoming IO360 piston-powered engine. It puts out 180 horsepower at 2,700 RPM. It's a two-blade prop, as you can see, by McCauley. Its fuel capacity is 53 gallons, which turns out to 318 pounds. Recommended fuel is 100 low lead, 100 LL. And its average fuel burns around 8 gallons per hour, which is pretty economical for a plane like this that can hold, 2 to 4 people. Its max takeoff weight is 2,550 pounds. Same for the landing weight. Its basic empty weight is 1,640 pounds. And its max gross weight is 2,558 pounds. And then its max useful load is 918 pounds. So if you want to decide how many friends you can take or how many bags, take out the fuel, and then you're left with that payload around 600 something, 700, or yeah, around 600 something for people, so you can maybe take 2 to 3 people with some bags. Its cruise speed is 124 knots. Stall speed clean, which means flaps up, going to be 48 knots. Stall speed landing configurations going to be 40 knots, which is full flaps. Best rate of climb is 730 feet per minute. You can just call that 700 feet, which is pretty decent. Max structural speed is going to be 129 knots. Landing distance is going to be 1,335 feet. Its service ceiling, it can go up to 14,000 feet, and its takeoff distance is 1,630 feet. So that is pretty much the basics for the specifications of the plane. So now that we're done with that, let's check out the inside. All right, now that we're in the aircraft, a big tip I would recommend is setting up quick look views. So I'm going to be showing you how to set up quick look views if you're not in VR. It's going to help you out a lot when you're flying, instead of having to look around, move the camera, and all this. And by the way, if you don't know, I'm holding down right click to look around and arrow keys to move. So we're going to set up a quick look. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the trim and fuel selector. I'm going to center it, then I'm going to go to it once I get it in a good view. I'm going to set control 0. Then next we're going to come over here. And another awesome trick is, so you have a lot of switches behind here and you don't want to dance around them. You can turn the yoke off. So we're going to want to come down here for the switches. I want to zoom in, get a nice look here. Control 1. Next, we're going to be going over the throttle and mixture. Control 2. Now we just want to get the flap lever. And over here, Control 3. Now back to the primary instruments, the 6-pack. These are the primary right here, and then these are the secondary. So for the primary, we want to just make sure we can see everything nice and easy. Control 4. Next, our Avionics panel. Want to make sure everything here is nice and centered. Control 5. Next, our ADF, Control 6, and you want a quick view glance to the left. Let's close this so you can see how it'd be. If you want a quick view outside, we're going to set that up Control 7. Next, our compass. Control 8, and then to the right side to glance out. trying to put it where the co-pilot would be sitting. Right here should be good as control 9. Sorry about that. All right, so now that those are set, we can go over them. I'm going to go back to the view you hop in with. We're going to go to 1 for our switches, 2 for our mixture, 3 for flaps, 4 for primary instruments, 5 for avionics, 6 for the ADF, 7 for quick glance left, 8 for compass, 9 for quick glance right. All right, so now that we have our quick look set up, now we can go over some of the controls, what they do, and how to operate them. All right, now that we got the quick looks taken care of, let's go ahead and look how we're going to operate some of these switches and panels. So on toggle and rocker switches, you're going to hover slightly over, and you're going to see an arrow facing up, and that's how you would control most things like this. And to turn it off, you're just going to put it right below the switch, and it's that easy. For throttle, you can either use the mouse to operate it for things such as throttle and pull levers like that, or I use a joystick, so it's going to be operated through my joystick, usually with a peripheral. For things like the avionics, you can either click, hover over, and click to turn them, or use your mouse wheel to spin. I'll show you a little bit later when we go in more in depth. And for things like buttons, you just go ahead and click them, and that's pretty much that. And all we have left is the yoke, and you can either click it with your mouse and control it, but that is really hard to fly the plane. So as well with the throttle, I have peripherals to control the yoke. And if you do have rudder pedals, which I don't, those would be controlling the rudder pedals on the ground, but I just have it to the twisty motion, the yaw motion on my joystick. But now let's move on to a tour of the cockpit. All right, guys, now for a tour of the cockpit. If you guys are following along, go ahead and press number keypad 4, and you should see the 6-pack or the primary instruments. So we're just going to go like this from left to right. So first, the airspeed indicator, which runs off of this, the pitot tube. It takes ram air to show your airspeed in knots. And this displays the aircraft's airspeed of which it's moving through the air and relative to the air moving past it, and not your ground speed. That is something different. There's airspeed, true airspeed, ground speed. And we can go over that later. But more in depth, we have the green arc. The green arc is a normal operating range of the aircraft, which is 48 to 129 knots. The yellow arc right here is smooth air operating range, which is 129 to 163 knots, which means do not operate this in turbulent air because there may be structural damage around in that range. Then the white arc from here, 40 to 85 knots, that is the full flapped operating range. So when you're coming in for an approach, do not put your flaps unless you're slower than about 85 right here. Next, we're moving to the attitude indicator, which as you can see is powered by a vacuum, the vacuum pump from the engine. It displays the attitude relative to the horizon, your aircraft. You can imagine it has the wings, so it would be tilting left if you were in a bank to the left, and vice versa for a bank to the right. It also shows if you're in a climb or descending. And this is pretty good when you're going through clouds, or say you're under the hood and you can't see the outside. This would show you your banks, turns, and climbs. Next, we can go over to the directional gyro. This is also on the vacuum. That's why I want to skip down here, also on the vacuum. It displays the magnetic heading through a gyroscope, but it needs to be calibrated to the compass on the ground previous to takeoff, because it has a gyroscopic precession, which we're not going to go over, but it can get kind of wonky in flight. So you need to make sure to set it in straight and level flight or on the ground. Next, our turn coordinator. Our turn coordinator informs both rate of turn and whether it's slipping. Right here, with the also known as the ball or inclinometer. If you're turning left and the ball is slipping to the right, that means you'd be in a slip and you need to step on the ball to keep it in the center to create a standard turn. Also, at the 4 and 8 o'clock notches, this would be a standard 2-minute turn. So if you turn the wings to that and you hold it, that would be a standard turn rate of a 360-degree turn would take 2 minutes. Sorry, it kind of took me a lot to get that out. Next, our altimeter, which is powered by, let's see if we can find it. I don't see it on the side of this aircraft. On my aircraft, it'd be right around here. Not seeing it, but it is a static port. So the altimeter displays the altitude above sea level, not above ground level. You can see that with like GPS and stuff like that, but you have to set it prior to each flight when you get the ATIS. But standard altitude, density altitude is 299 or 2. And this is powered by, like I said, the static port. Then last but not least, the vertical speed indicator, also powered by the static port. This shows your rate of climb or descent in feet per minute in hundreds. So now we can go over the secondary instruments. We have our clock here. Let's go ahead and turn the master switch on. Leave this on right here. Go ahead and turn the master on. So we have our universal time, local time, flight time, and elapsed time. So this is really good when doing cross countries, when checking waypoints and using, it's pretty good just for navigation. Next, our outside air temperature, right here. And then we have it in Celsius. And then the last thing is elapsed time. All right, now on to the secondary instruments. So let's start over here with the chronometer, which you guys would call a clock or stopwatch. It does a few different things. Shows you universal time, UTC, local time, flight time, and elapsed time. You can control the elapsed time with the button here. You can also see outside air temperature in Fahrenheit and Celsius. Next, moving on to our fuel gauges right here. Oh, sorry about that. Show our fuel quantity showing a little under 1400, but before, when you do your pre-flight check, you're also gonna check with to measure actually in the tanks, because sometimes these can be off, especially in older aircraft, but here, pretty accurate. Moving on to the EGT, exhaust gas temperatures. This is measured by a thermocouple that intrudes on the exhaust system, basically a little thermometer that attaches to the exhaust pipes. And the red needles, for something we'll go over later, helps with lean of peak or rich of peak. I don't want to go over that now, but the temperatures vary according to the ratio of fuel and air. So people like to run either lean of peak or rich of peak, and this can kind of help adjust that. Next, fuel flow. Pretty self-explanatory. It's how much fuel you're taking per hour. So when the mixture is going in full rich and the throttle's full, you would see this is probably up towards 10, but you can pull it back to kind of adjust and cruise. Next, our oil temperature and pressure. These are in Fahrenheit. The normal operating range is within the green. Same with the fuel pressure. You want to see it around 60. Vacuum pressure, you want to see it around, I think it's 4.8 to like 5.5, I believe. And ammeter. You can also check the ammeter on a startup by hitting this, but right now we don't have everything running off it, so it wouldn't show any discharge. Next, moving over, we have the RPM and Hobbs meter. Under here, that is the time the engine has been running. The RPM is the revolutions per minute, which is controlled by the throttle, and the green band is the recommended operating range. Next, we move over to the VOR and ILS receiver. We probably won't be going over these a whole lot, but These are basically for navigation, and I don't want to get into those too much because you have to go into localizers and frequencies and all that. But for now, just know these are for navigation. Same with this as well, the ADF receiver. All right, next we can move on to the avionics. All right, guys, moving on to the avionics. We're going to turn them on right here, bus 1 and 2. We can go ahead and press number 5, and we're going to go over the avionics panel. We're not going to go into complete depth about how to use each and everything because I'll probably have another tutorial for that, but we're going to go over the basics and what you need to know for now to get started. So this is the audio switching panel. As you can see, COM 1, COM 2. If you want to use COM 1, boom, COM 2.
Field information
I have the ATIS on there for a different field. So right now, that's pretty much what you need to know. You can adjust the volume for the pilot, co-pilot, sensitivities, and it's pretty simple for now. Next, we have the X-Plane 530. Basically, it's a Garmin. It's Laminar Research's interpretation of a Garmin 530, and has a lot of cool features. You can also click on it to have your own window. You can do flight plans, navigation, a bunch of cool stuff like that. Again, we'll do a more in-depth tutorial, and you can look for your own tutorials on there. There's a lot of great ones. But for now, know it's used for navigation and comms. Next, the 430. It's a backup. I guess you could say it's just also another Garmin 430. These are used in a lot of planes, a lot of smaller aircraft, such as the one we're in right now. Pretty much the same thing, just a smaller version. Next, we have our transponder panel. Let me move this. Transponder, I have 1200 in. That is the VFR when a tower would ask you to squawk VFR. The ATC uses this on a radar to identify your aircraft when going through controlled airspace. And occasionally, not occasionally, but when you're going through controlled airspace, a ATC tower controller would give you a special code to squawk to identify you from other aircraft. And you would have ident to kind of send off a ping to help them see where you are. You have it on altitude, on, standby, and off. So right now we can just keep it on off. Next we have the autopilot. Right now it's ready. We're going to go over it a little bit more in depth later, but it has heading, navigation, approach, reverse, vertical speed, and that's how you control that. Next, let's head over to our ADF, Automatic Direction Finder. It's a radio receiver that can be tuned into any non-directional beacon, NDB for short, within its range, and can provide you a course to or from the radio source. Then back over here, when you're using the panel, navigation or GPS. So you can see here, that's a quick switch. It's for the 530 and 430. It's a easy way to switch between VLOC / navigation and GPS mode. The VLOC or localizer would be used for radio navigation such as VORs or ILS approaches. And when navigating with the 530 or 430, keep it on GPS mode. All right, now we can head over to the switch panel. All right, over to our switch panel. First, we can start with our magneto switch. Where the key would go in, this would control right, left, both for the magnetos. It's a rotary control, and you can use by clicking the mouse. And this is used when starting the engine. And the magnetos is an electrical generator in the engine that supplies power to the spark plugs. There are 2 magnetos for redundancy, so in case one fails, you can still run. That's why on run up we check both of them. The engine would still run, a little less RPM, but it would still run completely fine. And these are both used in normal operations. The master switch, they're usually clicked on both at the same time. And again, you can just click them with your mouse. It provides alternator power and battery power for the electrical systems while the plane is running. All right, so moving along here, we have the fuel pump. It activates the electric fuel pump for priming when before engines start, and it also provides a good substitute for a mechanical pump in the event of a failure. We have our rotating beacon. We use that before we start up. Landing light, taxi light, navigation lights for the wing and tail, strobe lights for the wing, and pitot tube heat. Pitot tube's right there in case you go into icing because you need that for your airspeed. Next we move on to our avionics bus switches. Bus 1 powers COM panel 1, the G530 GPS, the transponder, the autopilot, the VOR1 and ILS, and bus 2. Bus 2 powers the 430, the VOR, the ADF, and the VOR2. And they are on different ones, again, for redundancy. Now we can move on to the panel lights. So again, you can hover this side and scroll down or scroll up for max brightness. And the bottom one, let's see, get to a different angle here. The bottom one is for the glare shield inner lights, and it's a rotary as well. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to try to show it once more. It's a little bit hard to see unless it's nighttime. There we go, got him going. It's a little hard to see unless it's nighttime, but don't worry about that. Next, head down to the throttle and mixture pedestal. The Cessnas are a little bit odd, I guess you could say. They have a push throttle, push stick throttle. It's a single throttle control, and this controls the RPM and the propeller. It's both linked in this aircraft. And when you take off, you're going to be pushing in full power, and it's pretty simple, just like that. And it also has a mixture control. It's a single mixture control, and it alters the air-fuel ratio that is entering the engine. And you pull it full out to lean the mixture, or you pull it back to lean the mixture, forward to richen the mixture. And that's how you turn the engine off, by cutting the mixture, pulling it full out. Because at altitude, as you increase, you want to lean the mixture because you want to compensate for the decrease in air density, so you don't want to be flooding the engine and stuff like that. Next, we can move on to the trim tab. The trim tab you can either use with your mouse, up, or you can scroll. I have it set to a button on my throttle control. They call it a poor man's autopilot. Let's see if we can head to the back of the airplane to show you how this works. There's a trim tab on the back of the plane right here. And it alleviates some of the need for the pilot to maintain forward or back pressure on the yoke. So I'm pulling it back right here. As you can see, it's moving. Pushing it forward. It's pretty nice when you're just up cruising and you don't want to keep holding up or forward pressure or back pressure. You're just going to trim the aircraft. And we have it set there for takeoff. Back to there. Next we have the fuel selector. Options are both tanks, left tank or right tank. And then also we have the fuel shutoff valve. All right, moving up, we have the Annunciator Panel. There's 4 things on here. First, we have it's hard to see, let's flip it on. You would see the left fuel or right fuel. This is saying there's a drop in fuel pressure for either the left or right tank. Basically means either you're out or there's a failure of the pump. Next, there's oil pressure. The severity level is pretty high. This means oil pressure is low, and it occurs when there's insufficient oil pressure or an oil pump failure. Next, the vacuum. You don't want to see this vacuum one pop up because it means the vacuum pressure is low, and since there's a drop in vacuum pressure, you do have a backup, something to back up for this, but it could mean low RPM in the engine, and also for a lot of the instruments. It affects your airspeed indicator, your altimeter, vertical speed, altitude, or attitude, sorry, heading indicator, and turn coordinator. So you need these for a lot of your instruments. Next, the volts. Pretty severe again. It means low voltage. The alternator is not generating enough voltage to keep the battery charged. You can still fly, but it could affect things like your navigation. Maybe you might want to turn those off if you have a failure, because you can have a discharge right here. As you can see, you're not charging, but when the engine's turning, you're going to start charging again. All right, that's enough for that. Now let's move on to the autopilot. All right, had to switch aircrafts for a second. It's still a Cessna 172, but had to swap it for a second because I looked down and realized there was no autopilot engage and disengage button on the other aircraft. But let's go over the switches real quick. Let's flip these on. Autopilot engage
6,
or
X-ray.
disengage.
Papa, cross runway 6, hold short of runway 6.
Cross runway 6, hold short of runway 6.
Sorry about that.
76 6.
Turn off that. Okay, so autopilot engage. This is used to engage or disengage. Basically, autopilot on or off. Second, heading mode. This is also a toggle button used to engage heading mode, which you can control with the heading bug right here. So say you want it going north, you would turn the heading bug there, hit heading, and it would follow that. It's a pretty simple method to use. I personally like it when you don't know exactly where you're going or you don't have anything plugged into the Garmin. It's pretty simple. Next, we have a navigation mode. Nav mode is used like in conjunction with the 530 or 430, depending what's on it, and it can either be used with the V-locks, the localizers. So right here, you would have it tuned in, and this would fly to that radial or whatever VOR localizer that is headed to, as long as you're in V-lock, not GPS. And then next we have or approach mode. I haven't used approach mode yet. Hope to pretty soon, but this is used to fly an ILS approach. Nav mode will also be engaged, as you can see, and it's going to capture a localizer and glide slope chosen by the ILS frequency. Something I probably could go in to learn a little bit more about, but for now, we're not going to be using that. Next, reverse. We have this as flying a ILS localizer back course, pretty much an approach, but the other side of it. Furthermore, we have alt or altitude mode. You can use this, say you're at 5,500 feet. You want to stay there, go ahead and hit altitude mode, and you're good to go. And then next we have VS, vertical speed mode. And the numbers are shown in hundreds of feet, as you can see here. So you can increase the climb at 600 feet per minute or descend at 500 feet per minute as you wish. And I would be careful to know, as we went over the specs, this can climb around 730, so I would probably put it at 500 to 600 when climbing to keep it nice and easy on the aircraft, so I would know the limitations. But now let's hop back into the other plane and go over some flight planning. Alright guys, now we can move into flight planning. And flight planning isn't just picking a destination and going, it's more than just point A to point B. It takes into consideration fuel requirements, terrain avoidance, air traffic control, airspaces, aircraft performance, airspace restrictions, NOTAMs, and weather, and a lot more. But we're going to try to keep this simple since you won't be needing all of that. I put in some basic info we might need. But let's start off with where we're going. We're going to, sorry that looks so weird. We're just going to do a quick little cross country from Gillespie to French Valley. On ForeFlight, I plugged that in, distance of 45 nautical miles direct. We'll just call that, that's how we're going to go. So this is going to take us 32 minutes with the 8 knot headwind. ForeFlight says we're going to burn 5 gallons of fuel, but we like to overestimate. So this is just also other info we need. So again, we have our taxi fuel table. Say, since we're planning for a cross country, we might need weather and all this extra stuff and to brief passengers. Say we're going to take 20 minutes to taxi. That's going to be 8 pounds of fuel to taxi. Now our trip fuel, we said we're gonna fly 30 minutes, so 32 minutes, let's round it up to 40 minutes. Sorry, that'll be 32 pounds of fuel. Just put fuel here. Next, for our weight and balance, well, I guess before we do that, let's just find out how much weight we would like to take. So we have our max useful load. Say we want to take two of our buddies. This guy's super excited. You have a big boy right there. So say you're 150, you got a guy that's 175, and then maybe a girl or something 125. So let's add all that together. 150 plus 175 plus 125. It's 450 pounds right here. You got to take out. So let's go to the 918 minus 450. You're left with 468 pounds left if you want to work from having as many people in as you can. Next, we want to have enough fuel to get there and back. So you're going 32 miles, nautical miles, or minutes, sorry, 45 nautical miles, 32 minutes. So there and back, you're going to be flying a little over an hour. So how much fuel can we fit in? So say the max fuel we can have is 318 pounds. So technically, if we wanted to, we could throw out 53 gallons. So let's take 50 gallons times 6. Minus 300, 168. Let's bring this down. So right now we have, for our payload, we have 3 passengers. We have 50 gallons of fuel. You have 168 pounds left for bags or another small person, depending how you want to do it. And you have plenty of fuel for a taxi there and back. And again, you could take out, 15, 20 gallons if you want to throw another person in there, because it's going to be a short flight. So for total fuel, weight, there's a little chart here. It gets a little confusing, but it basically matters what your gross weight is. So, 1 second. 750. So we'll take off our max takeoff weight. Or more time. 168. 2550 minus 1. We're just doing our max takeoff weight minus how much payload we have left. So this is going to be our takeoff weight right here. If we don't add any more passengers or bags, we take off with 30 gallons of fuel, and we'd have plenty of range with that. So that is a pretty simple and quick way to estimate that. Again, there is a chart. If we wanted to go over to the chart and we wanted 300 pounds of fuel, you can go over, find 300 pounds. It would tell us we have about 150 pounds of payload, and our gross weight would be at about 2,175 with those numbers. But this is a little bit more of a rough estimate, so you can imagine you can take 3 friends and go on a quick cross country. And so now let me show you how to actually go add the weight. Sorry about that. Perfect. So you can go ahead and hit escape here. You can go into your aircraft. We said we're going to take 50 gallons. You can also change your center of gravity here. You can do kilograms or gallons. So we're going to take 300 pounds. You can type it in. 300 pounds, 50 gallons. Your total weight and fuel. It was, the payload. Payload was higher. Fuel. It was pretty close. Payload, I feel kind of stupid for closing it. But I know we're 160 pounds off. So it's like 600. But let's start with total fuel weight with 300. And payload. Put that here. So you put in the fuel as you had it right here, each tank. Said I was going to do 25 each tank. And then payload, however many people you had. Add that together, and then we had a few pounds left over. And it shows you your flight cruise time. So again, you could take out some fuel, throw another person in there. But we wanted 300 pounds. Closer to max gross weight, and you can see the plane sitting a little lower. All right, so now that we got our people loaded up, our fuel on board, now we can go over our checklist. All right, guys, now we can start with our checklist. We're getting one step closer to actually taking off and flying this plane. So for our checklist, remember these are checklists strictly for X-plane, and if you're flying in real life, it could be the same, if like, or really similar, but make sure you use the checklist from your actual plane. But we're going to start here with the parking brake. Master switch is coming on. Going to go ahead and press number 1. Check our battery voltage. It's below 0, so it means you are discharging a little bit. I'm going to turn our beacon on to show people are getting ready to start soon. Landing light, taxi light, nav light, and strobe. Then we're going to hop over, press number 3. Extend the flaps fully. Then we're going to head to the pre-flight inspection, to the exterior. And let's hop over to the exterior. And this is just to make sure this aircraft is ready for flight. So to start out, this is not how I would do my pre-flight. Mine would start around with the empennage, then work my way back to the tail of the plane and around up to the front, check the oil and whatnot. But for X-plane's sake, we can start here. And we can hold the roll axis to check that the ailerons are working. Full left, full right. Then we can move to the back of the plane. Full forward, full back, make sure the pitch deflection works. And we can go over some of the parts. I'll go over just a brief description of the parts and what they do. Hopefully people know what they are and what they do, but if not, just a quick thing. So start off, we have the wing, obviously. Inboard we have flaps, ailerons, the horizontal stabilizer, the part that doesn't move, elevator, rudder, vertical stabilizer. We can go over the parts more in depth later, sorry about that, but for now you just need to know the basics and how they work. Next we're going to check the rudder, which helps with the yawing motion, and the nose wheel. Move around, check that the flaps are fully extended down to 40 degrees. Then we're going to do a visual check. Let's zoom out here. We're going to check 5 lights. First the rotating beacon, next the nav lights, green and red. Then 3, we're going to check the strobes on each side. Things do get pretty bright at night. Then the taxi light, which is inboard here, and the landing light. All right, so let's hop back inside. Now that the external pre-flight is complete, we can turn the fuel selector on both. Parking brake is on. Lights are coming off. Leave the beacon on because, again, that shows people we're operating. Fuel quantity check. Fuel looks really good here. Power to idle. Mixture rich full forward. Avionics bus 1 and 2, make sure they are off. Perfect. So now we're going to get ready for engine start. Put that right there. Make sure everything is locked and latched. All right, now for the engine start. If you're wondering why I jumped, I was at a different airport. So for our flight, we were going to do, or at least our flight planning, we were going to do a flight from Gillespie to French Valley. So it'd help if you're at the right airport. So now for engine start, throttle open 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Master switch is on. Fuel pump's coming on. You can see it using the battery there a little bit. Mixture rich. Beacons stays on as always. Propeller area. Clear prop. Starter, you can either turn it to both, and I like to hold control 1. And then starts right up. Then we're gonna hold it to about 1,000 RPM. Oil pressure check. Avionics bus switch 1 and 2 on. Radio's on and set. I think we have the ATIS for here too as well. It's 1, 2. I think it was 1, 3, 2, 5, one of those. We could look that up. Next, where were we? Transponder on, flaps retracted, gyro set, as we said, set it on the ground. Sitting about 90 degrees to the runway. I guess we can put the altimeter in real quick. Let me see what the ATIS is on our sectional chart. ATIS looks like it's 12545. Head over to our avionics panel, and you always want to do it in the second comm. What did I say? 125. And I'm using the scroll button here.
Gillespie Field Information X-ray. 2100 Zulu weather. Wind calm, visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 19,500 scattered, 34,500 scattered. Temperature
Skies are
14,
clear basically.
dew point -15. Altimeter 2992. Arriving runway 35, departing runway 35. Advise on initial contact, you have X-ray.
X-ray. So the important things where the clouds are not anywhere going to be close enough. Clouds aren't low enough for us to get close enough, basically. Altimeter 2992. You can adjust that in your settings to have different barometric pressures. Information X-ray departing 35, but we're going to be taking off at 27. Information X-ray. Looks like the tower frequency is 120.7. Let's see. Throw it down here. We'll just have that in here. Alright, perfect. We can be monitoring both frequencies right now. Okay. That looks good. All our instruments are set. We have information X-ray. We would make our call, I guess, when we get over there. Alright, so before takeoff, we're going to do our run up once we get over here. So we're going to release our parking brake and taxi. And if you're wondering why everything looks so wonky outside and kind of blurred, it's because I have orthos, so it looks a lot better in the sky, but on the ground it looks, you know, worse in Minecraft, so ignore that. I'm going to try to remember how to make a proper call to the tower. So we're at Delta 7. Slowing up here. And usually the brakes won't be that hard, but I cannot set up the toe brakes properly. So let's see, it would go something like Gillespie Ground, Cessna 172, Sierra Papa at Delta 7, requesting a taxi to 27 right for a northbound departure with information X-ray. I think that's how it would go. Then they'd read back, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, taxi to 27 right via Delta, and then I'd read back, taxi to 27 right via Delta. I'm not too familiar with the taxi diagram here, but when you are at airports, you have to hold short here and get clearance to cross. So right now we're just taxiing, throttles in a little bit. We can pick up some speed here. And we're going to go up to the run-up area. It's also good when you're approaching new airports to have a taxi diagram out. I guess while I am taxiing, I can pull up for flight. And I can pull up plates and whatnot. Don't taxi in for flight. Okay. It's a lot easier to do on the iPad, but looks like we're on Delta, yeah. Just keeping it nice and easy out here. We're gonna pull up, we can pull up to this one here, it's gonna be fine. And cut the throttle. Keep our nose on the center line best we can. Now as we're approaching, it wouldn't be that hard though. Alright, so before takeoff, parking brake is set, doors and windows closed and latched. Flight controls free and correct. Gonna look out the window, make sure your ailerons are moving accordingly. Look good to me. Flight instruments checked and set. Still good here. Altimeter 29992. Fuel selector valve on both. Hitting 0 there. Mixture is full rich. You can lean it for taxi. Trim is set to takeoff. Throttle to 1700 RPM smoothly. This is what's called a run up. Alright, now we're going to check our magnetos. We're going to scoot over here to make sure safe, but watch the RPMs. We're going to go to the left magneto. Make sure a nice drop. Get about 125, no more. Then go into our right magneto. Back to both. And in instruments, checked. Fuel flow green. Ammeter is good. Vacuum's in the green. Pressure, temperature is good. Throttle back to idle smoothly. Now we have our radios as required. Lights as required. Beacons on. Transponder on. Altitude, parking brake release. We're going to pull up and ask for clearance. We're at Delta 8, it looks like. I believe it goes who you are, where you are, or who you are, who you're talking to, who you are, where you are, what you want. We want a north. We just want a northbound departure. Oh, I hate when it stops at that. Alright, really quick. Let's go into our flight plan, and we want to go to F70. I should have set this earlier, so that is a bad example by me waiting this long to set it. We'll just use it as a waypoint. Actually, we just want direct to F70, perfect. French Valley, looks good. Takeoff, we're gonna rotate at 55 knots, flaps, make sure they're retracted, and we're gonna full throttle. So Gillespie ground, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa at Delta 8, 27 right, holding short for a northeast departure. Blah blah blah. Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, clear for takeoff 27 right. And then I would read back, clear for 27 right Sierra Papa, 2 Sierra Papa. So I taxi onto the runway. I'd be looking for traffic oncoming, which is hard because you're in a high wing. Hard for low wings when they're landing, so that's why a lot of incursions happen. We're going to want to line up here. We're going to want to smoothly throttle to full power. Going to want to hold right rudder for the left turn tendencies. Airspeed's alive and your instruments are within the green. We're going to start applying back pressure. Let the plane just come off itself. If you want, you can trim it. You want to be climbing, I think, 75 to 80. So keep the nose up here when I want to gain altitude. Some different views here. I'm going to keep that nose up again. I don't know why it's dropping so hard, but we want to gain some altitude over congested areas. So we want to be able to glide back to safety in case of an engine out. So we're climbing around VY right now. We're trimming, we're following the track here. Once we get up to about 2,000 feet, I will show you guys how to use the autopilot. But for now, we're still full throttle, max RPM. Climbing at, I want to keep it a little under 80 if possible. Sorry for that. And you can see the ground's starting to look a little bit better and more realistic, but we need to get a little higher. Alright, so we can go over the autopilot. So with this on, we turn this to GPS, or up here. Then we would turn nav on, which would put us on that path. Turn vertical speed, we want to still climb at about 500 to 600 feet per minute. And then once we get to, let's see, probably about 5,500 feet, we will level off. I'm going to want to climb a little bit more, put it up closer to the max, because we have some terrain to clear here. Alright, we'll let this climb connect to the heading and then we'll come back. Alright guys, so we hop back in. I ran out of the room real quick and I figured out my cat jumped on the table and turned the vertical speed to like 1,800 feet per minute, so I just come back here and all these beepings and had to save the plane. Put the GPS back up, but lesson learned, don't let your cat fly your plane. But now that we're back, I don't know why that was on either. See what happens? We're about 23 minutes out. I looked up on the chart. It looks like the highest terrain we have to clear is about 4,700. So, let's see. So yeah, we're gonna still go up to about 5,500 just to be clear of that. And we are, if you open this, about 23 minutes away. Ground speed's 92 knots. Airspeed's about 90. We're gonna level off here pretty soon. I'm gonna show you how to level off with altitude. Right now we're just waiting for a few hundred more feet. It's also nice to have forward flight on just to track your progress around. To our right, I guess if we look down, should be a landmark, Mount Woodson. Right here. I've actually hiked to the top of that myself. So it's pretty cool flying back past that. And it's cool how accurate you can see all the landmarks with this ortho on. But the ortho did run me about 200 gigs to download. Also, if you wanted to, you can hop in the back, see what it would be like for your passengers. I always kind of like this view, just a nice little GA airplane, you and some buddies flying out. Gotta love that with some smooth air. Alright, so we're approaching real quick. We're gonna put the nose down slowly. Guess we should do it a little bit softer. Still about 20 minutes out, it says. Bringing this down little by little. Nose is still up. Bring it down here. I'm going to use the throttle myself just to bring it up a few more feet so we can be as close as we can. A little bit more. Oh, perfect. Then we're going to go ahead and hit altitude. And it's just trimming for nose down, but it should hold around there. So right here, looks like they're on different tracks, but you can have those synced up for different things. So I guess we should go ahead and get all the info we need already. So let's see, French Valley, they have an AWAS, a CTAF. We go to the METAR, looks good, there's only 4 knot wind. Looks pretty good here. We have our taxi diagram, field elevations 1,350 feet. Pattern altitudes 2,350 feet. Let's look on the sectional 119025. 025 here. Looks like that would be the tower frequency. Might be mistaken.
Murrieta, French Valley Information Bravo.
Oh, for the weather, sorry.
2200 Zulu weather. Wind calm, visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 18,500 scattered, 33,500 scattered, temperature 12, dew point -15. Altimeter 2992. Arriving runway 36, departing runway 36. Advise on initial contact, you have Bravo.
Okay. We have Bravo. Looks like it's non-towered, so we'll be making comms on the CTAF, which is the 1228 number. Our ground speed's picking up pretty good right here. Yeah, 127 knots, so we're moving across pretty quick here for having a few people in the plane, you know. Altitude says 5,508 feet. 13 minutes left estimated. 28 nautical miles. And that's pretty much it. So while we're cruising, now that we're in cruise, I probably could have done this earlier, but I got distracted. Let's see. There we are. For cruise, we want to pull this back to about 2100 RPM. They say 2100 to 2700 RPM is good. I like 2300. Watch the fuel flow. Gonna lean it out just a little bit. Our ground speed is pulling back a little bit. If for longer cross countries you do want to lean a lot more, but I'd rather have the airspeed and stay at least at 110 knots, so I will keep the RPM a little higher, but I will lean a little bit. You see the EGT changing, we're running a little bit lean. Moving at 110 knots here. Because I would rather keep my ground speed the same if possible. And we're going to go off this track and then catch an extended center line for a straight-in approach. Alright guys, so we're going to prepare for our descent. We want to make sure our fuel selector is on both, mixture is rich, power is required. So something you want to remember is gumps, gas, undercarriage, mixture, passengers, seatbelts. So while we're descending here, you can zoom in from about 5 minutes away. I think I have the airport in sight, right over there. We have some altitude to lose. We can keep our airspeed, but we need to get down. We're going to want to trim because we have a lot of nose up trim from earlier to help us. Our before landing checklist will be fuel selector both, mixture rich, flaps extended. Check out the scenery here, it's pretty cool. Hop in the back seat here for a second. One of my favorite parts. Just looking at those wings. Amazing. So this is our glide slope right here. 4 whites, we are high, so we're gonna want to get down and catch that glide slope. Pulling the power back. Gonna want to get on the extended center line here and start a descent. We're at 1,000 feet per minute. We are about 2 minutes out at 3,000 feet, so we should at this rate be pretty good. You should capture that glide slope pretty soon here. I'm going to pull power back to idle, or at least 1500. I guess we can pull the nose up and add a notch of flaps here once we start to slow. But we have to make sure we're within that white arc here. You can pull the nose up to slow down a little bit. Click and slow, we're starting to drop again. Pitch is airspeed and power is altitude. So we're way high right here. We might have to go around. You're not a bad pilot if you go around, you're just being a safe pilot, so don't feel bad if you have to go around or anything like that. I'm just going to do a forward slip to lose some altitude here. It's just a technique to use to lose altitude. There we go. Got one red light. Now I can release the rudder, put the power back to 1500, and get back on. Perfect.
500.
500, we're adding another notch of flaps.
1 mile final runway 36.
Thank you for flight. Now we're a little bit low. We're going to add a little bit of power here. We're going to keep this. When you see 4 red, that means you're really low. So we're going to add power on the way in, make sure we can make the runway. You usually shouldn't have to do that, but I cut a lot of power out there at the end. You want to pull back, cut the power. Wasn't the best landing. I might want to go back and do that again. Let's check it out. I mean, it actually wasn't that bad. It just looked a lot worse from the inside, but it was pretty smooth for the most part. Just a nice little touchdown. I got slow at the end, but yeah, not bad. Alright. Let's get out of pause here. Pulls up a taxi diagram. We're gonna pull left here. I think this is Bravo. I hate when it slams on the brakes like that. After landing, we're gonna retract our flaps. Make sure it's rich. And trim is reset. We're gonna do that. We need to turn our strobe lights off. We're just gonna taxi over here for shutdown. Strobe lights are off. Alright, we can taxi up here. And then we will shut down. Seemed like a pretty successful flight to me. The landing got a little slow. I could do a better one. I will do better ones later on, but it got the job done. Turn in a taxi. Let's take the spot next to the other Cessna over here. Nice King Air. A lot of Cessnas here. Alright, let's see if we can line this up. For tie down. There we go. Trying to make it as straight as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it to be sloppy either. Pretty good to me. Alright, I'm just gonna open the door, get some fresh air in here. Parking brake's gonna be set. Throttle to 1000 RPM. Avionics off. Electrical switches except beacon off. Make sure idle cut off. Master switch off. Fuel selector valve or right tank. Hobbs time, record your tax and your flight time. So overall, that was a pretty good flight. I do hope you guys got a lot of information out of that, and hope you guys now kind of know how to tackle a flight, so flight planning, how the aircraft works, and this transfers over to a lot of the general aviation aircraft. So I hope you guys did enjoy. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. Put some time into this one. If you guys have any requests for other aircraft for something similar like this or other procedures, leave it down below. But I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll see you next time.